Evolution Another World is a card game for 1 to 4 players, plays in about 20 minutes. Game score is a very solid A-. Want to find out why? Well, come on back after the break. Hey everybody, welcome out to the show, Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to our wonderful tabletop gaming hobby, and this video is a full review of the game of Evolution Another World. Now, Evolution Another World is a game for 1 to 4 players. It has a very quick play time, and this is a game that uses multi-use cards. I am a huge fan of multi-use cards. If you ever give me a game that gives me multi-use cards, I'm going to be in all the way. You can check out games such as Race for the Galaxy. You can go ahead and check out games such as 51st State. You can check out many games. I can sit here and rattle off a lot of these games that are in my top 51 games of all time. I really do enjoy multi-use card games. Now, the idea for Evolution Another World, I'll just keep referring to Evolution even though it's the most recent evolution of the game itself. The idea of this game is this is a very fast-playing game where the mechanics and the gameplay creates a game where you are going to take one of 16 different traits to go ahead and evolve your creatures. You're going to keep evolving your creatures by continuing to add various different traits to create combinations. These combinations are going to allow you to take various different actions in your effort to win the game, and the way you win the game is being the first to go ahead and create your third evolution. Now, if you want to go for a very long game, you can play for 4 evolutions, and while that works perfectly fine in the lower player count games, I would not recommend doing that in a 4-player count game, and I'll talk about why I want to talk about the player count for this game. But this game does a great job creating this fast-playing game that has a phenomenal amount of ease of access, but having a very long learning curve, which is the reason why I've always enjoyed all the Evolution games. I'm a huge fan of the Evolution games. It should come as no surprise that I like the newest iteration of the game itself. My favorite Evolution game out of all the Evolution games has always been Evolution Climate because I like the extras it adds in there. I love multi-use card games, but I am, at my heart and my soul, I am a gamer who likes the more involved, the more complex games. You give me the classic Civilization games, the world-building games, the games that take hours of play, and you have my attention. The quicker playing games, except for Race for the Galaxy, just because of how deep of a strategic game it is, that's also a game that's very high up on there. But the reason why I appreciated Evolution Climate so much was the fact that it added the extra thing, the climate board, which I thought brought an extra level to the gameplay. What Evolution Another World does is it tries to simplify a lot of those mechanics, not in a bad way. I'm not using simple and as a negative here. I'm using it to show that this game has taken the game and brought it down into a much more tighter package. This is a game that only has 16 powers. This is a game that has a very strong set win condition. And this is a game that is going to create a game structure where you need to start learning combinations. This is more very much about the combinations and not much like you can do in some of the Evolution games where you can do a lot of turtling. In the other Evolution games, it's very easy to create this little blanket of creatures in your own little creature area where you have your creature in the center, which will protect the ones to the left one protects the one to the right one's protected by the one to the right here, and you create this little area where you have this perfect little thing where you can work towards building resources. Well, I think that's an interesting mechanic. It does create a different style of game, and the earlier Evolution games had this mechanic where you had the herbivores and the carnivores, and the carnivore mechanic was always a little bit wonky in the game. What do I mean by wonky when I talk about the carnivore mechanics? Well, the carnivore mechanics never really worked at every single player count and all the different permutations of the game, the way the cards came out, which is something that was kind of a struggle that the game had. It was very possible for you to go down one path when you were playing the earlier Evolution games. If you picked the carnivore path and the cards didn't come out in your favor, or the other players just went too defensive, you ended up having to cannibalize yourself and you were pretty much a little bit in trouble. What I appreciate about Evolution Another World is it's kind of moved away from those mechanics a little bit and brought it up much more into a simpler form. You simply have your cards. They're going to be placed down to create your creatures, and you're going to get one of 2 different abilities to play on the creature based on the cards that are going to be in your hand. I appreciate how they simplified it by bringing in a smaller subset of abilities with 16 special powers and the synergy that you have from this. Also, I also appreciate how they simplified it with the attacking mechanics. There's 3 attack cards that exist in this game. There's fire breathing, there's lulling, and there's vampirism. They each have their special things that are specifically very good about doing. Vampirism is very good about taking away resources from another player who may be pulling ahead from the other players. You have fire breathing, which is good for taking down a very over-evolved creature that another player may have on their table. And lulling is a nice sneaky mechanic you can use that can kind of take certain pieces out of the board, or out of the board state, I should say, to kind of help keep the game going, which creates a game that plays very well at multiple different player counts. Now, before we talk about the player count, I want to talk about the game itself and how the game is played. Now, this game, and this is going to dovetail into the player count in just a second, this game plays very, very well with what it has here. It's very super easy to teach. There is a little bit of luck in the game, but there is definitely a very strong level of mechanics, a very strong strength of learning how to play the game. This is a game that's going to evolve with you. I'm not trying to use a pun here. I'm literally being literal here with you. As you play this game, you're going to learn how to play the game better. You're going to learn the mechanics. You're going to learn how to change up your strategies and your tactics based on how the other players are playing. Additionally, the other players are also going to be changing their strategies based on how everything's going. And I love how this game does that. If a player builds a fire-breathing creature, you may want to build a defensive creature, or you may want to build a creature that can take that creature out, or you may want to do different tactics. I appreciate how this game goes together, and the game is going to play differently every single time you play it. There's no set strategy that seems to work every single time you play the game. This is not one of those games where you sit down and say, I know, I see I have this card in my hand, yep, I'm going for this strategy at the start of the game. This game doesn't work like that because this is a game about playing the table. I always want to say this game has a slight poker aspect to it because the game of poker is never about the game itself, it's about your opponents. Evolution is very much the same way. You want to play the game for your opponents and also for your own cards yourself. If you have an opponent across the table who's playing very defensively and going after the source, do you want to race them for the source? Or do you want to create creatures that can tear their creatures down? Or do you want to do a combination of that? Or do you want to play a little more bit defensively? Or do you want to have some creatures that combination off each other that allows you to create more energy faster than your opponent can create the energy while keeping their creatures asleep while they're trying to play defensively. So you have a whole bunch of back and forth that goes into this game. Now, the game has a lot of wonderful artwork that comes with it. It's a great, fantastic presentation. I love the artwork that comes with the game, especially these little cats. I don't know why these cats just seem to tug at my heartstrings. I'm a cat person. Maybe that's what part of the problem is. But the artwork in here is absolutely very colorful, very bright. And the cool thing I love about this game is this game can be played with the younger kids. Now, I want to go much below 9. I know the game says it's for ages 11 and up, but if you have a fairly bright younger child who's about 8 or 9 years old, the fact that the artwork and everything right here looks absolutely enticing to the younger kids. Plus the fact that the mechanics, while they can get evolved, it isn't very, very hard to play. The game is simple. You, on your turn, are going to build a creature if you want. Then you're going to add a trait to a creature if you want. Then you have to do a mandatory action. That's a super simple mechanic to teach anybody, and it's a great thing about the game. It's super simple to teach, but there's a long tail to the game because you have to learn all the combinations of how everything works together. So I appreciate how all that goes together to create this very, very solid package. Now, there is a little bit of luck in the game, which is kind of nice why I mentioned the younger kids, because it does mean that the younger kids still can have a chance versus the adults. It's very possible to get a set of cards that may not work in your favor. Now, there's that mulligan mechanic, and in my playthrough video, I never cover the mulligan, or I never use it because I'm trying to get through the mechanic plays as quickly as possible and to show you how the game plays. But that mulligan does help it create you, or I should say minimize that luck thing where you kind of get in trouble because you get a set of cards where you kind of go, yeah, this doesn't help me at all. So that mulligan mechanic can kind of help you a little bit, but there is a little bit of luck the way the cards come out. Additionally, there is a little bit of a potential where the game can almost have a foregone conclusion. And this is one of the things that will lessen as you play the game, because you're going to understand that, I'm looking across the table, I see my opponent just put 3 energy down. As you play the game more, you're going to go, okay, they either have a tiny card or they're about to put a card out there that's going to give it astral, and they're going to get that last astral source from over there, or they're going to do that. So the more you play the game, the more you start memorizing all these different powers, the more the game is going to play better and seem a little bit less like the luck is going to influence things. But it's very possible in the couple early plays, you may feel like the things are going to be influenced by luck. Play the game more, learn the strategies, learn the tactics, learn all the combinations, and you'll start appreciating it's not quite the case. Now, let's go and talk about player count with the game, and this is where we may have a little bit of things I want to discuss when it comes to player count. This game plays from 2 to 4 players. It has a nice solo AI, and the solo AI that comes with the game works out very, very well. It's a very aggressive AI. I'm going to cover the full AI in another video where you get to see how exactly it works. And the AI is actually a phenomenal way to learn how to play this game better. Matter of fact, if you're not playing Evolution Another World very well, play against the AI. It'll make you a better player. I guarantee it, because it's a super aggressive AI. But this game plays from 2 to 4 players, ignoring the AI aspect of it, and I think this game plays great as a 2-player game. It's a very back and forth style game where you know who your opponent is, you know what your objectives are, you know exactly what your opponent is doing, and you know what defenses you need to get in place to prevent your opponent from winning the game. Because remember, this game is all about being the first to get that third transmutation. First person to do it is the winner of the game. When you go to the 3-player count, it becomes more of a game that has that Root style of gameplay, and I like to use Root as a reference because everybody knows Root. But in the game of Root, the idea of playing Root is to always be in second place while looking like you're in third place and then getting that super cool move and winning the game. This game still does that in a 3-player game, and it's very easy to do so by just kind of having your cards out here and letting the people, the other 2 opponents, kind of bicker back and forth, and then you do your awesome move and win the game. When we get to the 4-player game, that's where we start seeing some interesting things, the way the evolution of the game works. Because in a 4-player game, there are cards in this game that create an aggressive play style. You have the vampirism cards, you have the fire-breathing cards. It is very possible when you play this game as a 4-player game for players to get kind of in this mindset of kind of a take that mechanic that may occur when you get this game into a 4-player game. It's not going to happen all the time. It is going to happen when you're learning to play the game, though, because players are going to see, I guess that's a bad word to use, but players are going to see that that's actually a good tactic, is by going out there and playing aggressively. And you may get this situation where you get a lot of back and forth, where I fire breathe you, you vampire me, I lull you, you fire breathe me back, I lull you. And that can happen a lot more in a 4-player game, because you're going to see a lot more of the cards are starting to come out, and you're starting to cycle the deck a lot more. What I would suggest in a 4-player game when you're learning the game, because unlike the other Evolution games, this game is not going to come to an end after a deck is empty or when a certain amount of rounds are over. This game comes to an end once one player gets that third Evolution token. What I would suggest in a 4-player game and a 4-player only game is take a certain amount of these source cards and deal out amount of source cards based on a player count +1. Why do I say player count +1? Well, I say player count +1 because this actually allows you to play the game as a 5-player game. Sorry, hopeful thinking on my part. It's one thing I do miss about this game, and why I enjoy Climate quite a bit, is because it does play up to 6, and it plays up to 6 very, very well. I usually have 5 or 6 players at my game nights. So what I would suggest when you play with 4 players, play with number of players plus 1 card for the source. Once those cards are completely used up, don't draw any more cards. Make that the final round of the game. And then allow every single player to get 5 points for every transmutation token they have. Not 4, but 5. You understand when you play with these rules. Or it's a little homebrew when you play the game. Plus 1 victory point for every single energy token they have on all their creatures. Whoever has the most amount of victory points is going to be the winner of the game. I would suggest doing that when you're learning how to play the 4-player game, only because it kind of minimizes the aspect of the players getting the mindset of thinking that I attack you, you attack me, I attack you, you attack back. It kind of lets them know that there's a finite amount of rounds available to them, which will kind of force them to use other strategies. Once players are very familiar with the game, I don't think you need to do that anymore, although I find it fun playing the game that way. But just understand that in a 4-player only game, I would suggest using that homebrew rule just to help minimize that a little bit of attacky back and forth, and force the players to see the other strategies and the other tactics available through all the different evolutions for all of their creatures. Now, beyond that little issue when you're playing with a 4-player game, I have no issues with this game at all. I greatly enjoy all the evolution games. I really appreciate all the artwork, and I didn't mention this earlier, I love the fact that these are large cards. I am not a fan of the micro cards that a lot of card games come with these days. I actually despise micro cards. I have a large hand. I'm able to palm a basketball. So if you give me micro cards in my hand, I sit there and I get very, very grumpy. I am very glad that we have some very large cards, extremely colorful, a very, very nice, vibrant artwork on these. Very easy to understand the mechanics. They took the time to give a little breakdown of what all the powers do on every single card. You have these nice sheets right here which break down all the powers for all the different abilities, and I also appreciate that kept the abilities down to 16. It kind of minimizes all the different extra powers available in the game while making it enough of a different set of powers to make sure you get some very cool combos, some very cool abilities, and you get those really cool moments where you said, you see what I just did there? Oh yeah, that was super duper cool. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoy this video series. If you have any comments or questions, make sure to leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll make sure I get to them as quick as I can. You also feel free to email me off-the-shelf board game reviews. That is otsbgr@gmail.com. I do my best to answer those emails as quickly as I can. If you enjoy the channel and the content I put out there, think about supporting the channel over on Patreon. Patreon.com/OTSBGR. This channel is 100% sponsor free. It means I give you my own free opinions, but that also means that everything has to come out of my own pocketbook here. If you enjoy the content, tossing $1 tip jar is a great way to say thanks. But you don't even have to do that. 2 seconds and 2 mouse clicks. Click that like button, click that subscribe button, and you know it. As always, thanks for watching.